and welcome to Among the Jungle podcast. I'm botanist and host, Shai Kaina, and I'd love for you to join me as I interview the incredible plant people of Instagram to create an audio vault of inspiring botanical knowledge while harnessing a deeper connection with us in our natural world. If you're ready, it's time to inspire your wild. Aloha, jungle dwellers! Today we're speaking with my dear friend Terisa Brenna, intuitive spiritual coach and sacred geometry buff, as we deep dive into the fascinating world of sacred geometry and discover what roles sacred geometry plays in the plant kingdom and how plants use it as a pattern for growth to optimize light for photosynthesis. I'm very blessed to have her right here in my very own home recording this episode with me. It's been really fun experimenting with new ways of recording an interview, and I'm so looking forward to sharing this highly anticipated episode with you. This episode is really best appreciated with access to the show notes to give you a clear idea of the concepts we discuss. Be sure to access those at amongthejungle.com/009 and tune in to the end of the episode to see how you can earn yourself a free gift we collaborated on just for you guys. Today we will learn the fundamentals of sacred geometry, how sacred geometry relates to the plant kingdom, and how you can use it to begin cultivating a deeper connection with the natural world. With all the love and light in the universe, let's welcome Terisa to the jungle.
Wow, thank you. I'm so excited to be on the show. When I had suggested this topic of sacred geometry in plants a while back, I think it was in fall, I did not imagine at that time, that you would ask me to speak about this subject, so I'm incredibly honored as I'm very passionate about it. It's a pure joy to be here. Thank you to all the listeners out there for tuning in today, wherever you're at. As a nature buff myself, I have a deep love for Gaia, even though I'm not much into the plants and caring for them with a green thumb on the daily. I'm excited to connect with this amazing plant community.
Yay! So if you would like to share a little bit about you and maybe your first significant memory of plants.
I'm the creator behind Starseed Apparel. That's stars in the sky, seed is in the soil. I design eco-friendly, sweatshop-free, spiritual lifestyle apparel such as t-shirts, leggings, and stickers, and things of that nature that speak to the soul. I created the brand 3 years ago, strictly by my purpose to inspire and empower the spiritual journey. Well, that has now evolved to where I'm, or rather who I am, today as an intuitive spiritual guide. It is my passion to deliver positive, empowering, conscious expanding, higher wisdom in various mediums such as blog posts, Facebook and Instagram posts, and even more recently, videos to help people connect with their spirituality and to discover their true selves. So, don't let me fail to mention how obsessed I am with space as much as I am about rainbows. One gives me a sense of home while the other brings me joy. So that's me on a fundamental level.
Tell us a little bit about what is maybe your first significant memory of plants.
Yes. I would say my first significant memory with plants was dandelions. Growing up in Minnesota, the rural valleys seem to have no shortage of these ubiquitous fuzzy flowers. Though I know it's considered to be a weed by many, I guess. And I know it gets a bad rep. As a kid, though, I saw nothing of that sort. They were like tiny little toys that could be plucked from the ground at will and could be enjoyed in multiple states, of course. From fully bloomed yellow flowers, my favorite, to the white fuzzy dome of the seedlings that looked like a lollipop and begged to be blown by the beholder. My friends and I used to also rub the yellow pollen concentrated flowers down our arms.
Yes, we would do that too. Yes.
Why? I don't know.
Or they would do it under your chin. They would like rub it under your chin and they'd be like, now it's yellow. You're just like, wait, what? What does this trick even mean?
It was so random. I think we made some sort of game out of it, such as that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, late in this season, when they transformed into little wands of magic, we'd pluck them and make a wish just before blowing and scattering the flying seeds of wishes out into the world. That young, it seemed to be so magical and so whimsical to me. And the best was when we'd find an open field of like hundreds of dandelions and run through that, creating this vortex of seeds drifting into the wind from all directions.
I just love the idea of that. Just like visualizing people just like blowing their wishes and it creating this like big vortex of seeds and going out into this field, and like all those seeds then like root those wishes down into the earth and grow them into new plants. It's just like, how could dandelions ever get a bad rap? It's so sad. They're so beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. It was almost like that moment delivered so much wonder and joy, even as a kid. The dancing seedlings delivered a sense of connectedness between us, between the wind, the nature, the cycles of life. It's our greatest teacher in reminding who we really are and where we come from in a very, modern, chaotic world. The blueprint to life itself is held in the very thing that we often take for granted. Our natural world and connection to source, to God, to the creator, to all that is.
So speaking of our connection to the natural world, what is sacred geometry? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'd love to. Okay, so before jumping into things, I want to quickly preface this by saying I don't claim to be the only knowledge holder regarding this somewhat ambiguous topic. There have been many masters of late, such as Leonardo da Vinci, to name one. The Egyptians studied it pretty heavily, to name another. And of course, more yet to come. But I do know that I have a deep soul connection to sacred geometry ever since I started down this rabbit hole several years ago. And it continues to unfold, let me tell you that. I have been fascinated by sacred geometry in various forms, from the geometric patterns seen and observed in nature to energetic systems unseen by the naked eye, such as the Merkaba.
What is the Merkaba?
It's kind of an advanced topic or concept to understand, but we have energy systems within our bodies, such as chakras that everyone's familiar with. The Merkaba is an energy system outside of the body. And the Merkaba is known as the vehicle of light, and how you can travel interdimensionally, which we all know or may be familiar with how we do that in our dream state. But the human body and energetic system is intricately linked to the Merkaba.
That's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's definitely a rabbit hole that I encourage you guys to go down into. The topic of sacred geometry is so vast and very heavy, and it's very much a very visual platform to absorb this information as opposed to, over voice. So I strongly encourage you to go on into any rabbit hole you feel drawn into, because it's just fascinating how many connections to make between what we see in physical form and that which the geometry around us is intricately linked to. And then on top of that, how many different systems build upon each other. But we'll get to all that in a little bit.
Yes. So definitely I've organized all of this for you so that you can visually follow along on this journey. Of course, I already offered some visual examples on Instagram that you can follow along with in our story and on the Instagram page itself. But I spend so much time, so much more time in the creating show notes for you guys than I ever spend recording an episode. So I highly, highly recommend going over to the show notes for this episode, which will be amongthejungle.com/009. And you can follow along with all these visuals that we're talking about. All the different aspects of sacred geometry, the Merkaba, which, is very similar to a three-dimensional version of the Star of David. But these are difficult things to discuss and give you a visual for. So it's really helpful if you can pop over and check out some of those visuals for yourself. It'll make the journey very, very enjoyable for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get back to your original question, what is sacred geometry? Well, Well, believe it or not, there's not a lot of definitive information on this topic out there, regarding the symbols and the meanings of them. It just all seems to be wrapped up in a veil of mysticism, especially when I first started getting into sacred geometry. But regardless, I'm here today to offer a very straightforward scientific approach to demystify the mystery of these age-old symbols, and to also share my journey with getting into sacred geometry, because for some reason I just feel intimately connect with this subject matter. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that you know something, but you don't cognitively know it. You know it deep down. Something's really just familiar there, and it's just waiting for the right time to reveal itself. Well, that to me is what sacred geometry is. So the
That's
deeper
beautiful.
I go into this, the more I know information will unfold. For me, it first started with observing these symbols and patterns in nature and developing a deeper appreciation and connection for like the divinity and things. So first, I want to tell you that it's not mysticism by the classical definition. Sacred geometry is the blueprint of creation and the key to manifestation of form from non-physical to physical. You can think of it as fundamental geometric shapes such as circles and triangles, to name a couple, that connect in infinite formations to materialize a physical expression. In physical manifestation, they're recognizable patterns such as the bloom of a sunflower. But in 2D form, you may see graphics of them as wireframes out there. So I just wanted to show that connection. You may be familiar with seeing some of the symbols out there, but they do manifest into physical form.
Yeah. So a lot of what you'll see in the show notes and as some of the pictorials that'll be laid over the images are these 2D forms. Like that's how you're seeing it. But you definitely have to think of all of these forms as three-dimensional, because the wire frame, so to speak, that you're seeing is really just the two-dimensional version. They're all 3D to even 4D effects. And so it's really good to think about that when you're looking at them, is that they are much more dynamic than what we're seeing in the 2D layovers.
Yeah, I think that's what also what also makes the mysticism seem more exaggerated, is because it's typically only seen in symbol form, and that could just mean multiple things. Like, what is it, alchemy symbols, So a heads up, that's kind of like the foundation of starting to understand those symbols. But the underlying premise of sacred geometry is that it's basically the DNA of the universe. Not only that, but it's also the fabric that connects all of creation. And you are part of creation. Therefore, you are made up of various forms of sacred geometry. I already mentioned the Merkaba in the outside energy field. But the seed of life, for example, is what begins the cell divisions during the genesis of the human body. Like I said, these kind of topics really deserve their own deep dive. And you could talk forever about like that process alone, the genesis of the human body. So we're not going to cover too much of the stuff in depth here. It's more or less to speak more in broad strokes and to introduce you to sacred geometry, give a few examples that illustrate that. But for the sake of going through, how is that manifested through creation, I did include a graphic or a visual that will aid in seeing this. Because seriously, just by looking at it, you'll be able to see the various forms of sacred geometry taking place in the first stages there of cell divisions. So if you want to take a moment to pop that up right now, this would be a good moment to do that. You have access to that while you're listening to this. Otherwise, to speak to it, it starts with a single cell in your body, and then it divides. During that process, you can see an overlay that would be called the vesica piscis. I'm pretty sure. Not too sure that I have said that correctly, but that's where you have two circles overlapping. And then from there, further divisions and rotations of the cells take place until you form the seed of life. I don't know if you guys may be familiar or have heard that term before, but the seed of life is the first cell system in the human body, in the genesis of that process. And then, the cells continue to produce. From there, from the seed of life formation, which is going to be 7 circles now in a cluster. But then from there, it can also divide and multiply into the flower of life formation, which is going to be even more circles. So sacred geometry is basically universal geometry that continues to manifest in various forms and be embedded on top of each other that dictates creation, basically. So I hope that kind of helps bridge an understanding.
So let's break down the term sacred geometry. What does that term actually mean?
Well, let's just start with sacred. The word sacred. It feels weird sometimes, doesn't it? Like secretive, mystical, a little fairy-dairy. So what if we just drop that word and simply call it universal geometry? Because that's truly what it is. In that sense, more patterns such as the Fibonacci sequence, spirals, phi ratio, golden mean, etc., all that can be grouped under it without sounding so secular. The word sacred had developed, back when ancient civilizations developed these they discovered these geometric systems that held the keys to the universe. That's very empowering knowledge to have that at that time.
Definitely.
It was so powerful and so profound that, for the time, the powers that be didn't want anyone else to find out about it. So, as we know, it was a very disempowering world back then. They locked it up and regarded it sacred, with not even a word spoken about it outside of those walls. So that's where the term sacred really gets pulled in. But while I do find it to be sacred in its own wonder and miracle of creation, I feel that many others may be getting tripped up by that word. So maybe we can just disregard that or maybe just scrap the sacred part in geometry and think of it more as universal geometry. But today, rest assured, I'm here to tell you it's 100% scientific and abundant in the world we live in now and forever. It's right under our noses and in our homes, in our very houseplants and gardens. I love that.
So very similar to the building blocks of the digital world, just like on our computers where everything, the internet really is a compilation of ones and zeros. Everything that you experience in the universe, from your loved ones to your plants and all the things, are all the building blocks of sacred geometry, which are virtually the ones and zeros of our living, breathing world. So with that in mind, what does sacred geometry really mean to you?
Well, we've already discovered geometry as a fundamental foundation of the universe from a micro to macro scale. So I always feel rest assured that this stuff is real and scientific. I always have a backbone of it having solid proof and study out there for thousands and thousands of years. But the connection that I've personally built to it, I think the short-term answer is identifying and observing. That's where I started my journey with sacred geometry. And I think I think sacred geometry can have personal connections to everyone individually. So for me, it first started with identifying in my physical world what different patterns were coming through. For example, in flowers, in leaves. It's really easy to see these things in nature. Even the spiral is a repeating pattern all throughout nature. The double spiral in our galaxy, and tornadoes, cyclones, things things like that. Then I began understanding how it can help us from a practical sense in our everyday lives, and I'm still trying to unravel that mystery. Then moving on to a level of mastery, and then using those tools of creation and manifestation from an empowered place as source creator. That's kind of the perspective I take. And once I started to understand some basic fundamental laws of creation through sacred geometry, then it just started making me wonder what lies underneath the surface there, and begs the question, well, what could we do one day, if we knew all this knowledge, how could we use that information to create, to just create instant manifest? I don't know why, but I'm always thinking about how to bring magic into this realm. I remember when I began this rabbit hole, I was fascinated by all the patterns that overlaid plants in their life cycles. So it's not just going to exist in one form purely and in this one state. Going back to the comment about it being the DNA of the universe, it has continual cycles activated at different, or manifested, however you want to say, throughout the life cycle of form. So going back to flowers, especially with the blooms, I started noticing the overlays and the patterns in those first. So at that time, I purchased this collection of sacred geometry graphics, I think from Creative Market or something, not having any idea what any of those symbols meant. Then as I looked at the sacred geometry symbols, I went on this massive Google image hunt looking for other flowers or forms of nature that would mimic those patterns in all various forms, and not only plants in nature, but space as well. So in the human body. So as I started to look at them and see the familiar patterns, I recognized it sent me almost into this fun game to see if I could pair a symbol with a flower or plant, or vice versa. Once I discovered that pairing, I would then look into the meaning of that symbol. So all in all, it became this fun dual learning exercise that allowed me to see the universe at large and appreciate nature in a new light. I think that's what makes sacred geometry so special to me, is being able to see the magic behind creation, that it's not random. Everything in sacred geometry has purpose. And it's more organized than I had previously perceived. And it's not as random as I thought nature was. It deepened my connection with the universal force energies that connect us all to see the beautiful miracle in life in all of its many unique forms. I'll have to admit that there is still some sense of that underlying sorcery and magic I'm curious about in terms of how can, these symbols possibly heal us or empower us to be creators and manifest our hopes, dreams, and wishes and desires. So, but I know that's far out there, but that's kind of what it means to me in a nutshell.
So sacred geometry not only form the building blocks of pretty much everything, but they also govern very often, especially in relation to plants, the way in which things grow. We think that it might be random where a plant puts out a leaf, but we notice that there's an overall pattern. It's very specialized, and it's all based on sacred geometry. The leaves come out in very specific patterns, and that is all to optimize the amount of light that each leaf and petal would receive. So when a new flower blooms and it's got this perfect pattern, and we notice that pattern is repeated again and again and again in those same flowers and in other flowers, that is sacred geometry. That's sacred geometry that you're observing on a regular basis. If you have a little cacti at home and you look down at him from the very, very top, most likely you are going to see some beautiful pattern or form of sacred geometry, because the patterns that form of the spines of the cactus, the patterns in which the seeds form in the center of a sunflower, all these things are sacred geometry right in front of our face. If you look at a head of broccoli, there's sacred geometry all over and inside of that. And honestly, that even expands into a whole nother thing, which is sacred geometry growing on top of sacred geometry, which then creates things called fractals, if you've heard of that term before. So it's definitely, sacred geometry is definitely an advanced topic. It literally applies to all forms of life. It applies to the creation of stars. It applies to the creation of cells. It applies to plants and animals and the earth as a whole and the universe as a whole. But today we were just kind of trying to dip our toes in the water and give you guys an idea of what sacred geometry is, how it can begin to be observed in your everyday life. And I think one of the most beautiful and easy ways to physically observe sacred geometry is through plants, which makes sense because plants are the freaking most awesome thing ever. So with that, what are some specific patterns you've observed in nature?
Oh my gosh, so many. From the sacred geometry symbols, such as the flower of life, to other patterns, such as the Fibonacci sequence you kind of made mention of just a moment ago, in which the Fibonacci sequence is, if some of you are not familiar with, I'm sure you've heard that term before, Fibonacci fractals. Definitely encourage you to look that up. Fibonacci sequence dictates the rotation and the placement of leaves and things like that in plants. So yeah, that in combination with the golden ratio, identifying, the golden ratio is in the conch shell and things like that. So before I get into some examples there, I want to take a quick pause to point out, again, the show notes. We provided a lot of fun visuals because it's going to take 1,000 words to describe
what one quick, beautiful glance at the show notes will fully show you. Like, really, we want you to be able to comprehend and like really understand what it is we're talking about, because when you start seeing it all over and in patterns that you can recognize in your own house, it just makes it so exciting to basically be able to see like the cellular structure of how things created and grew and still hold those same geometric patterns even as they grow and grow and grow. And it's just such an intimate connection with sacred geometry, looking at it through the lens of plants. And so we really put a lot out there because we wanted you guys to be able to fully absorb and understand everything that we're talking about. And the show notes will definitely help you out. Again, that is amongthejungle.com/009. So you can see all these beautiful formations that she's going to talk about.
Yes. The first one that I want to point out that I've, discovered earlier on in my journey was, and going back to the dandelion, it's called a decagon formation. But basically it's 3 different triangles overlaid by certain rotations. And what I was seeing there was this structure that kind of dictated the dome and the depth of that. So that was kind of the first one I started with. And the second one I'm going to point out here is called the lotus mandala. That's the geometric, pattern over a daisy. In the daisy, we see several different rows of petals, and the lotus mandala to me made the most sense and the strongest connection with that visual.
You guys, it looks just like the daisy petals. Like, it's unbelievable to see it.
Yeah, it's amazing. The third one is this is houseplant, the most ubiquitous houseplant, the succulent.
Oh, yeah. Someone's got an agave at their house. I know it.
I love succulents. So this one was the square matrix, simulated on this succulent. And that, to me, was showing the rotation and proportion of the bloom. But easily a couple other geometric forms come to my mind too after revisiting this, after gaining some more knowledge. Definitely see the Fibonacci sequence unfolding there as well.
Yeah, you can definitely see, like I discussed, the growth pattern of the Fibonacci sequence, and you can see that each leaf is laid out so that it maximizes the sunlight, because that's what a plant needs to do to create energy. Yeah, that's really, really beautiful.
Okay, so getting out of the dirt in the soil, I went out
just
into
for
space.
1 second.
And in this next example, in this fourth example, I was observing a nebula and saw the Vesica piscis. And that's with 2 overlapping circles. And on this visual, they are dotted, but they overlap to create a new central form in the middle. And over this nebula, it was just pretty inspiring to see that it repeats not only there, but not only is it found in nebulas, which are the nursery of stars and things like that, and galaxies, but the vesica piscis is also part of the initial cell division. So that formation is also.
And in this visual, you can definitely see the two cells overlapping from the first cell division and seemingly almost creating a third eye in the middle, which is really beautiful and would definitely be the heart of the nebula. So that's definitely a cool visual to check out.
So rad. All right. The fifth one, going back to flowers, is the lotus flower. Is this? It's actually called the lotus flower, and it's simulated over a dahlia. But again, you guys might see more, and we highly encourage you to go on a hunt and see how many patterns you are observing over these.
Yeah, and we're going to share some of just the geometry itself, some of those images with you in the show notes, so that you can draw your own comparisons and conclusions. And I mean, I highly recommend. We put a lot of love and time, energy into these images, and they are beautiful, beautiful images to use as a meditation tool. Really looking into the center of a flower and recognizing all the patterns and the geometry. I mean, your eyes just take you to another place. So, I mean, I highly recommend using these visuals. They are a great source for meditation.
Yeah, that's also a good point to make. What I've been trying to uncover more deeply is how sacred geometry can help us, empower us in our daily lives from a practical standpoint. And I know that meditation has always been.
I like to meditate with the flower of life. That's the one I do the most meditations with. And honestly, the more that you stare into that 2D form that's printed, the more your mind actually turns it into a 3-dimensional shape coming off the page. You actually, the longer that you spend absorbing it and looking into it and gazing into it, the more it actually it comes off the page and turns into the 3-dimensional image that it actually is. And so I highly recommend taking a minute to be distracted by the plants and actually bring some peace to your mind.
Yes, that is so beautiful. Okay, going into this fifth example, we have the Taurus, which is seen here in the aerial view, top view. Again, this is 2D. So in 3D, it actually kind of looks like a donut with the center hollow. The Taurus aerial view formation is simulated on this chrysanthemum, showing the bloom and how that would look. We're reviewing it top level, but also if you saw it straight on, rotated it to be straight on, it kind of reflects the whole overall bud. And then last example is a really fun one.
My favorite. You definitely want to check this one out.
I told you, I looked all over.
And this one is also a great representation of fractals.
Yes. Oh, I love this one.
Yeah.
Spiraling pentagons is simulated here on the Romanesco, or otherwise known as Roman broccoli, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Okay.
So just as a quick recap, let's go over some of the aspects of sacred geometry that we have talked about today. We've talked about all the forms that we can see in life: the circle, the vesica piscis, the egg of life, the seed of life, the flower of life, the fruit of life, the tree of life, Fibonacci's numbers, or also known as the golden ratio, the decagon formation, the lotus mandala, the square matrix, the lotus flower, the torus, and the spiraling pentagons. Doesn't that just sound magical? Everything I just said sounded so beautiful and magical. And actually getting to see them and visualize them in the natural world is 100 times more beautiful. So I definitely highly recommend doing some of your own searching and deep diving into the subject if you're interested in more. If you even just look up the sacred geometry of plants, that's not really a specific standalone topic that people are really diving into, but knowing that it's the building blocks of everything, we can see it everywhere. I mean, of course, if something is built in a pattern, then it's going to continue to be a pattern. Fibonacci's sequence is seen from the little tiny pieces of sand on the beach, and the shapes to the shells, to the way plants grow, to the way forests grow as a whole, all the way out to the way universes grow and are created. And so everything goes from, like she said earlier, from a super micro scale to a super macro scale and everywhere in between. And so plants are just such a beautiful way to really make this connection with sacred geometry and really just to have fun with it. That's the whole point of it, is just drawing us closer to the natural world. But it's exciting because I know most of us have a lot of them in our very own house. So Terisa, with all that wonderful information, what would you like to leave our listeners in the plant community with today?
Well, I hope that this has helped inspire you to look at how the physical world is intricately linked with the spirit world, because that is what sacred geometry also offers. I didn't go much into depth about that, but as we all know, most of you may already be in alignment with this or not, but that plants are sentient beings. They also have energy, a life force to them, spirit, basically. So that's part of the formula here, is matter and spirit. So I would encourage all of you lovely plant ladies and gents to embark on your own journey of discovery into this endless, vast world of sacred geometry, to dip your toes into the pond or jump in head first like I did. The purpose of today's discussion was to paint some broad strokes. Hopefully we didn't overwhelm you, but it's just to make that connection of plants to universal geometries, if you will, so you can start to identify the symbols and patterns taking shape in the plants you grow and care for. I hope this episode throws sparks of inspiration down a rabbit hole that excites and fascinates you as much as it does for me. But let me forewarn you there, you're definitely opening up Pandora's box of wonders, meaning that this path is continuously unfolding. The deeper you get into that rabbit hole, the smaller the universe gets, yet gets more expansive at the same time, more intricate, conscious, and divine. To me, that is the sacred part in sacred geometry, to see the sacred connectedness of spirit to matter within self and with the outside world.
Yes, 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 a million times yes. And that's such an important thing that we really want to connect here. This is such a diverse and dense topic. Just paring this topic down to what you needed to know to make it practical was a challenge in and of itself. Paring down and paring down and paring down to be able to deliver enough content that you can understand what sacred geometry is and how it affects the natural world and how it affects us and how we can use it as a tool of observation and of deeper understanding and of deeper connectedness to everything around us. It's my hope that we were able to pare that down in a way that is tangible, yet still magical, because that's really, like she said, that is where the sacred comes from. It is just such a magical experience getting more and more connected to the natural world.
Yeah, and of self, too. It's very much a self-discovery journey, too. And hopefully today I've planted some seeds for you. But for a crash course, I would highly recommend the Sacred Geometry movie on YouTube by Spirit of Science. This movie, this episode that they put out, oh my gosh, it has a wealth of information and just packed in within an hour. They talk so fast, but it's really good good first source to start out. So I would highly recommend starting there if you'd like to look further into this. Link will be found in the show notes. That's where I started and continue to watch this movie over and over and over as much as like even this week to absorb more information because it's just very vast. And then from there, if you'd like to further explore on that topic alone or on other side shoots, I encourage you to look up cymatics. That's also patterns found in through sound and visible through sand or salt, some sort of like small particle object, as well as platonic solids. Platonic solids play right directly into sacred geometry. It's just way too broad to cover today. The Merkaba has very strong significance with us as humans and our soul connection. And then the sacred geometry, which is also found in music and harmonics. Also, a fun rabbit hole is looking up waveform versus particles in quantum physics, because they also drew a connection of particles down to like the most tiniest minute measurement we can make of physical matter in this world. They discovered an overlay of, I believe it was the star tetrahedron, but some sacred geometry symbols overlaid that as well. So it's all truly, truly so fascinating to see the universe connected in so many different forms.
That's awesome. And I will definitely have links to all that stuff in the show notes so you guys can shoot off on some of those topics as well. Getting into the quantum realm of any source or kind, quantum physics, quantum entanglement, quantum mechanics, quantum computers, quantum all the things is very, very interesting stuff. So I hope that this episode was both spiritual and super techie, because both of our brains work on those two levels. We're definitely split right down the center of being very, very spiritual beings and definitely wanting to understand the science behind all that spiritual magic. So all these topics are great bridges between the spiritual and scientific community and backed by both. So that's what really gives them the most power. Mm-hmm. So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Starseed and where we can continue to support you and follow your journey online?
Oh, I'd love to. Okay, so as I mentioned, I design, apparel, leggings, t-shirts, and stickers. I even have sacred geometry stickers in my shop and things like that, and shirts. So if you want to look into any of that, my website is starseed.shop. I'm also on Instagram, starseed_tribe. And then I guess one way to support me right now is if you would like to sign up for my email newsletter, that's going to be launching very soon. I'm going to be doing some fun things, but mostly going to be delivering inspiration and empowering wisdom, things about sacred geometry, it. Just kind of a good mix of positive and informational subjects. So you can go to my website, that is starseed.shop, and sign up for my newsletter there. If you scroll down to the bottom, that would be wonderful. I'd love to have you in my community.
Yes, absolutely. Get a little love and light in your inbox. Also, together, and we're going to do a sticker collaboration, because who doesn't love stickers? They're the best. They can be used on everything. They're great inspiration. And we created some really fun ones from the overlays that we created for this episode. And, so it's actually a 2-sheet sticker pack, and it'll have 8 stickers in total. They will be some sacred geometry, all plants, and some little quotes and fun things for you. So yeah, that's definitely something that we want to share with you and want you guys to check out. And I'll have the links to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we just thought it'd be a nice extra little goodie to help you along your journey of discovering and identifying all these different patterns over plants. And may I also mention it features Shy's beautiful photography. So it's very special.
True. That's true. It is really special. I've been wanting to share. I've been taking pictures of plants for over a decade, a long time. I have terabytes and terabytes of photos that I don't get to share with anyone. And it was so exciting. Some of the photos and graphics that you'll see in the show notes are not my photography, but everything that will be on the sticker packs will be my photos of flowers and our geometric creations and interpretations of them. So that is a special little thing that we made for you guys, just so we can turn this virtual conversation into something physical and actually, connect on a physical level. So we're using sacred geometry to manifest this digital world into physical creation through these stickers. One last thing we want to talk about. So Terisa and I actually first met in Tennessee, and she lived in Nashville and I lived in Knoxville. And she actually was the first guest after I built my photography studio to be my first Airbnb guest. And she showed up the first night with her adorable little dog, Charlie, and we ended up staying up all night long talking about the universe and all these magical things that we're touching on today and beyond. And I wound up asking her to stay another night, and we, of course, continued our friendship over all these years. And so being from Tennessee, we kind of had something on our hearts that we wanted to share with you all. So I'm going to turn it back over to Terisa and let her talk a little bit about that.
Okay, sure. As we record this, it's March 6th. And earlier this week, Nashville actually was struck by tornadoes, which is pretty devastating. About half of the city has been dismantled. And while that's a really heavy-hearted topic, of course, the resilient Nashville community is already throwing up their sleeves and getting to work restoring that beautiful city. So one major loss that has been reported, right now it's still kind of coming through grassroots style from the residents themselves. Some still don't even have internet or power, but when I checked with one of my friends, who's also has a landscaping background and arborist in his own right, he had reported that thousands of trees were destroyed and maybe tens of thousands, which is really significant. And we all know we need trees. Can't ever have too many trees, right?
No.
So what we're wanting to do is focus a lot of energy in making sure we restore those trees as quickly as possible. He's already immediately taking action on that. And so we're trying to raise money to plant trees to make our city beautiful again. So if you feel called to do that, we would love if you would donate. Any amount of, is wonderful. We will have information to the donation link, the GoFundMe, in the show notes as well. If you feel called and would love to help restore those trees in the Nashville community, every dollar and every little bit of support will really go a long way in the efforts to rebuild.
So one of the main goals of the podcast this year, that is actually a work of the collaboration with you, the listeners, is our collective goal of planting 5,000 trees. And where better to start than at home? So we will definitely have a link to this in the show notes of where you can donate to this cause. I will also have a link in the link tree on our Instagram page, and you will be able to access it through there as well. Just as a little added bonus, anybody who feels compelled to donate, if you make a donation of $10 or more, all you have to do is take a screenshot, send it to my inbox at Among the Jungle on Instagram, and we will send you a free pack of stickers. So that's just kind of a little incentive to anybody who is maybe wanting a sticker pack and also wanting to help the earth. Any donations over $10, just take a quick screenshot of the receipt, message it to me at Among the Jungle podcast, and you will have stickers on the way. And just from our hearts and from the incredible volunteer state of Tennessee, We thank you for everything in advance, and any help and every single dollar will be of great benefit to reforesting such a beautiful state with really, truly incredible people. They will make every dollar the most valuable possible.
I know Nashville's community is hurting right now, but feeling the support from outside sources like you really helps this arduous recovery process bearable. Thank you so much for your consideration and for listening in today.
Yes. And thank you, Terisa, so much for being here with us today and talking to us about such a fascinating subject. I'm sure we sparked lots of interest out there on all different kinds of topics. I'm sure people will be left inspired.
I sure hope so. Thank you so much for having me.
There's an exciting and intricate world hiding right in plain sight, isn't there? We encourage you to dig deeper into the paths that stirred your interest and welcome new ways of observing the plant world into your life. Engage your RAS, or your reticular activating system. You know, that phenomena where you had never seen your model of car anywhere before until you purchased it, and now you see them everywhere? This is what RAS controls, information your brain deems important. So I suggest using the tools we provided in the show notes, engaging in this week's challenge, working a new muscle in your plant brain, and sharing this episode with a friend that you think that this might pique their interest as well. As for that challenge I mentioned, the challenge this week is to find a sacred geometry pattern in your own houseplants, or pictures you've taken of the natural world. What patterns do you see? Share the photos with us on Instagram and tag Among the Jungle Podcast and Starseed_tribe, and we'd love to share those photos with the community. Don't forget to follow Starseed_tribe on Instagram, as well as Among the Jungle Podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode at amongthejungle.com/009. And as always, share with a plant friend, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It literally means the world to me. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I hope that you have a deeper understanding of the intricate network of patterns that connect us all. We truly are all one, made of the same bits of stardust, just in different geometrical patterns, blooming in our own divine time. Until next week, jungle dwellers, love, light, and aloha. I am so grateful to the plants that bless this beautiful earth, and to you for choosing to nurture a wild place inside of your heart. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I'd love to hear your feedback, suggestions for future guests, and other botanical notes at amongthejungle.com or amongthejungle on Instagram. It's been lovely exploring this exotic world with you today, and I look forward to where the journey takes us next week. Mahalo for tuning in, and stay wild.